Hi everyone, it's Mr. Barden here. This video is going to be kind of again a teacher's edition of content from the programming digital media course that I teach. So if you are not a teacher for that course or a similar one, this may not be the most useful, usage of your time. I would recommend checking out some other videos. I have one dedicated for functions on this channel, as well as just other resources on YouTube in general. I'll be gearing this one. I'll be going through the content, but I'll be kind of gearing it as if I'm talking to the teachers and giving tips and comments and stories for them. So again, if you're not a specific teacher for this course, this may not be very useful for you. If you're still here, then I definitely recommend considering giving this video a like, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. If you enjoy it, you learn something great. Uh, if there's anything specific that you didn't quite understand, or if there's a topic that you would love for me to cover in its own dedicated video, put those down in the comments below. Uh, I'm kind of building up a list of topics that various people who watch these videos want me to cover. So as those come in, and I have time, you'll see them populated in a playlist of viewer selected topics. With that being said, I think that's just about everything, so I'm gonna dive right into it. Uh, I mentioned again, this video is all about making functions in P5. And again, we've kind of used some of these already. We've got the create canvas and background here that pop up just by default. But basically, we'll be having students make their own versions of what we see here, kind of the larger scale draw and setup. So I'll talk about it kind of as we go, and we'll build some. And basically, what we'll be creating is custom code that can do whatever we need to tell it to do. So again, the chapter for there is code that does a thing. That is what we're going to be doing, kind of making a tool to achieve some process. Um, Again, we've used a lot of these for the shapes and things of that nature. They're all functions, and basically what these functions do on a broader scale is they take in some value, and they serve just pretty much as an equation in the computer's memory, an algorithm, and based off of that number that you put in or don't put in sometimes, the input will be a little, or the output will be a little bit different. So you can call the function multiple times, give it different values. These are the arguments that we type into the parentheses, and it will have repeated different outputs based on how those values change. So we can do this, and I think it's good to think of it as like a template for what you want to do, and that's what these next two videos will kind of be about: is making, wanting to achieve a goal. In this video, it's the result of a function, and the next one will be objects, um, and then having a template in order to pull that off as many times as you might want. So here, I've got a single little ghost drawn on the canvas. I'll move him up a bit. There we go. And this is everything needed to draw the ghost. All right, it's cool. It's great, but just kind of think about it. I've got this kind of brought up here. Is what if you wanted two ghosts or three or four? You wanted them all to be different and be able to change and adjust them and have them be in. Just looking at this here, there's about 15 lines of code just to draw this one ghost here. Unless, again, say you wanted four or five of them, that would be 15 times that, and then you have to make variables to control anything you want to change and adjust. It becomes a lot of code very quickly just to get this variations on this output. So that's why we're wanting to make a template in order to create these various things, these various repeatable goals, and pretty much that's kind of the key to this. Actually, is the goal of a function is anytime you have repeated things that you have to do, put that in a function. You don't have to repeat yourself. You don't have to copy paste. You just call that function. So Maybe we want to have the repeated ghosts, like I mentioned. Um, does this one have? Where are ghosts? This code might be not working well. And not particularly sure what's happening there, but um, the the idea is, again, you want to have multiple times to do this. Maybe you want to have something that picks random values. Maybe something that generates a bunch of objects. It can be whatever you want. But if you have something that you're doing more than once, it's generally a good idea to make a function that handles all of that, even if it's something really basic, and then it you just call that function as a template. So, looking at this code up here originally, again, we had all this just in the draw function. It can become a pain in the ass to work with. Um, and some of your students may fight you about doing this and want to do this and go kicking and screaming. But once, in my experience at least, once they've realized that, oh, I only have to do it one time, it becomes a lot simpler. Um, yeah, something's weird with the mouse and all that. There should be two ghosts at this point. I don't know where we've seen them, but or maybe not. Um, but anyways, so here we've got everything. We've got another function added. We're function ghost, uh, and several arguments listed out. You may kind of be seeing where this is going, but then we have all of that content from before, just like I mentioned. Uh, but we have all the things that we want to customize right here. So we can change the X position, the Y position, the size, and the color of the ghost. And the way that this will work is, as we're saying what we want to have happen here, any arguments that we want to give it will get filled in. So uh, ghost X, anywhere in here that there's ghost X, whatever number we would type into that first argument is going to get filled in just like a variable, um, right there. And same thing with Y for the second argument we type. Uh, it's going to go anywhere there's ghost Y, size, color, all that's going to go in order. So because size is the third thing in this list, whenever we call ghost, again, the name of our function here, the third argument will be the size. So that one will be 1 point. Everything is scaled up by 1.5. The fourth one is color, so we put the color there, and again, it just kind of fills it in. It's relatively straightforward, I think. So again, you say function and you give it a name, just like variables. But it's important that, again, you do not have two functions with the same name. It won't work. You'll get an error when that happens. Um, the parentheses, that's where you would put your arguments if you need them, and then whatever you want to have happen, and then you just call it by name. So do that here. What I do is, whenever I make these kinds of things, I go to the very bottom of my code, the furthest down you can go, and then go a few more lines. The reason for this is, generally speaking, like this, you cannot declare a function inside of another function. I'm speaking broadly, and there are ways you could do that, and reasons why you would want to. But for the context of this course, uh, the way we're defining these, you don't want to put them inside of another function. So go all the way to the bottom, past your last bracket, all the way down there. And that's where we type in function. And this is where we give it a name. Just like a variable, it can technically be whatever you want. That could be a function. It will be a horrible function name. Um, and you want to describe it to be, what does this do? So maybe function smiley. That's what we'll call this. We get the parentheses because it's a function, and the brackets. And that's what we have here. So generally, the way I like to go about building this is kind of how I'll give tips to my students, is make, one version that you can't adjust anything in for what you want to do. And then if you want to have that customizability, then you can go in and start adding the arguments and replacing that as we go. So, for example, let me just hop into draw and we'll call smiley. Nothing's happening because nothing is here in smiley. So let's just go. I'm gonna use this to put a smiley face on the canvas. So that's what we'll have here. A useful tip is to do what I'm just about to do. Is call the function is it push and pop, and I always forget which one goes first. Pop, but push is first. So p push pop. So this essentially push and pop are used together. This always together. And if you want more information about them, you can look them up in the reference, but you can't have one without the other. And essentially, this just creates a localized bit of scale. So again, we have the global scale, for the whole sketch, the local scale within the function, and now we're just local even within that. So it's kind of like the whole sketch is your house. The function is the room. The things in push and pop is like a cabinet in the room. And then if you had multiple, a container in the cabinet, or you can go down as low as you need. But this creates a sense of scale. And the reason you would do this is sometimes you'll have things like over here in our function up here, we would have something like translate, or another function called scale, and things like that. You would affect large numbers happening afterwards here. Um, but if you don't incorporate them in its own scale, right here, they'll affect other things. So translate moves everything after it by whatever x and y values you give it. Um, so if you don't kind of encapsulate this instance of it, you'll affect everything else in your sketch, and it'll be a pain in the butt to find and fix that. Same thing with scale; it multiplies everything by the number you give it. Uh, so anything after that gets scaled up. So again, if you don't have push and pop here, then everything, even outside of your function, will get scaled up or translated, and it's gonna be a pain. So I always, when I'm making a function that draws something, add push and pop to start. Then that's why. So let's go in. Let's just draw my face. Ellipse. That right in the middle. Let's make it, I don't know, 100 by 100. Right there. I'll turn my auto refresh back on. I'm not planning on doing that. So boom, we'll start with that. We'll say ellipse. And we'll put this at width 2 minus 50 divided by 2. This is the boring part where I type stuff. Minus 25. Alright, so yeah, no. It's 25. Maybe we'll make this minus 20. There, that works. So then I'll just kind of copy this again, and we'll go plus 25. And then this won't be a smiley face. I'll just call this function face instead. So I'll replace this face. Now we can see it. Because I'm just going to do a straight line for the mouth for the sake of time. Line. So that's just there. And there's a line, and maybe instead of 50, we'll go 25. Oop, plus 15. Yeah, well, let's leave it like that. It's got some character. So this will be our basic face. Maybe we'll fill. We'll make him not feel great. You know, maybe they're a little sick. Oop. Fill 255. Yeah, something like that. I'm not gonna put too much effort into it, but there's a function. The goal of this function is to make this face. Um, the reason we would want to do that is because in whatever sketch we're making, we're gonna want to be able to put multiple instances uh, on the canvas. So we can do that. So every time you call face, it will put this face in this look. It will do this exact thing every time. So if you don't need any kind of variance or customization in your function, that's fine. In fact, we're going to see one in a little bit as I'm going through some of the more useful functions that my students use, and just to kind of cover all the bases of the different variations of this. Um, but again, let's say that for this purpose, we want to make something that can be customized. As for what, that depends on what you are making in that instance. But generally speaking, things like location, size, color, those tend to be the most common ones. So we go into where we define the function first, right there. And in these parentheses, like you saw before, this is where we're going to give each one a name and the order we want to type them in. Generally speaking, I do location, size, color, and sub break that down as needed. You could theoretically have an argument for everything, but that becomes a real pain in the butt to manage. So having just more general things that you can, like mouth angle, that could be a thing you want to adjust, but you may want to limit other aspects because you don't want to have 30 arguments in your function, because then you have to remember what each of them is in order. It's a pain to manage, and anyone using that function later on isn't going to want to do it because they'll have to remember 30 numbers in order and all their ranges and data types. It's a real pain. So we'll do X, Y, size, and color is a function. So to avoid issues, we'll do base shade. Why not shade? And you can adjust that however you might want. Um, so these are the arguments, and this is the order they're going to be. So later on, when we call this function, we will, have to remember this order. So let's go. So X and Y. So the easiest way to do this, I think, is for all of the base location for this is to replace it with 0. So all the width divided by 2, height divided by 2. That's the core point I used to draw this. That is now 0, 0 in our mind. So what we can do is we'll add a translate function. And this, again, shifts everything after it within the scale by its amount. So we can say, we'll translate this by X comma Y. And then everywhere we have a width or height divided by 2, that becomes 0. So this will just be negative 25. This will just be negative 20. This will just be 25. This will just be negative 20. This will just be negative 50. This will just be 15. This will just be positive 50 and 0. So now we've got those. And you notice some things starting to shift around. It's all way up here. So we got X and Y, size, pretty useful. I think generally putting this after translate works better because the function to adjust this scale basically multiplies all of the location and size values or more so the size values by whatever we do there. So size, the name of our variable. So putting it before translate can mean that you can affect the translation with the scale. So I usually put it after here. So I'll scale it by the size. Boop. So we got there, and then the face shade. So whatever color we have here, we'll replace it with face shade. If I could type at all, there we are. Um, and that's pretty much it. Notice that this has all gone away now because we're now looking for these values and we haven't typed anything here yet. So let's do that. Let's go width divided by 2, height divided by 2, scale of 1, face shade of lime green. And boom, same thing. So we'll leave that person there. Let's make another copy of this. And maybe we want to go down here to function mouse pressed. This is a function that exists in P5, um, and it just runs everything one time when the mouse is pressed. You can't make another function mouse press because it already exists in P5. However, it doesn't do anything by default, so that's why it doesn't pop up here with setup and draw. So you can call it like so, and then whatever you tell it here, that's what's going to run. So maybe instead of this, we could say, mouse X, mouse Y for the X and Y of our face, a scale of 0.25. Well, for now, we'll leave it for lime green. If I rerun this, so now every time I click the mouse, what did I goof? Why don't we see this? X, Y, size, face shade. Is it getting covered up by my background? Yeah, it was just getting covered up by my background for a reason. But every time we click, now we get another copy of this face at that location. I don't know why the background was covering it up immediately. Um, I guess I know it's just because it's happening once, so we can put it in a conditional statement. But I wanted to show it off as a function. But anyway, this is a function with arguments. An example of a function without arguments, like if I go all the way to the bottom, function random colors. Again, this is more of like a bit of math or some little process you would want to have happen repeatedly. And it can be whatever you want. This is a function that will make random colors. And this is also a function that it will return a value. This is something we'll talk about in a second. But it does a few things. I'm just going to build it. And there's a few different ways you could build this. I am going to purposefully be redundant for my students when I build this in order to kind of walk them through the process and refresh them of some previous things. There's one here, and I'm basically going to be doing this kind of thing. But again, there's about 3 or 4 different ways you could pull this off with varying amounts of code. I'm going to show you the most redundant way that I can do that. Let color equal 4. Let we call it this color because color already exists. Okay, so I've made an empty array. So I have that right there, and then I'm gonna make a for loop that's gonna do a thing 3 times. 0, 1, 2. That's kind of the how we're going there. So this dot color, specifically whatever I were on, equals random or for new shade actually equal again, I'm being as unnecessarily redundant. Okay, so I figured I'd type it first and then explain it. Again, the most redundant way I can make this with extra typing. So this function, what it's going to do is we're not going to give it any arguments. Instead, it is going to give us an array of three numbers that we can use to represent a color. Um, so I started by making the array. Again, this is locally within the function because we don't need to discuss this outside of the function at all. So every time this gets called, we're going to make a new version of this color. And I just made it an empty array. And basically, a for loop is going to run three times. That, call back from the last lesson. Boom, there was that. And basically, we're going to make a variable. And that new variable is going to be a random number between 0 and 255. But because that has a decimal, we kind of want that to not have the decimal point. So we're going to floor it, which just gets rid of the decimal point. Uh, any of that decimal bits. And then we're going to push that value into that specific element of this color array. And then the for loop repeats, so we get three new random numbers, and then that all gets added to the array, and then we're going to return this. So a return is kind of the last thing I've got here. Basically, whenever you call the function, it will give you back a number, and that number will be filled in wherever you have typed the function. So in this sense, let new shade equal, we've called these functions. They're both going to return a number, and that number is what we're going to assign new shade, which is essentially just going to come out to be a random whole number between 0 and 255. You don't technically need all of this stuff to create this function. Um, you can pretty much do just this, what I've done right here in the textbook, um, and condense it down to two lines. But for the sake of redundancy, bringing back the idea of arrays and for loops, and variables even, I kind of pull this back and make it extra redundant for the students the first time I show them. Um, so now I've got that there. So now maybe instead of lime green, we can instead instead I want it to be random colors. So whenever we click the mouse, I'm going to get rid of the background and just kind of leave it there. So now every time we click the mouse, it should be a random face color. And something has broken. What have I broke? I'm just kind of going through everything real quick. If I just got rid of the flu. Oh, we don't need the I. Um, there. I think that's what was giving it a problem. Yeah. Um, so basically, I started off by saying, well, this element could equal that, but then I was like, well, it could be even more redundant and bring back the push. So you do not need the bracket I. We can just say this color, which is an array. And now every time I click the mouse, it is a different random color. Uh, Now I'll have a whole lesson on colors as as we start the graphics unit. So just trust me on this, but basically, we're making 3 random numbers, and each of those random numbers control the amount of red, green, or blue in that particular color. We mix them all together, and that's how we get this. So again, don't worry if the color bit doesn't make a ton of sense. We'll get into that bit of color as we go. But just know that this is a function that does not take arguments, and it returns a value. Um, so again, we're getting something back to use somewhere else. So that's what we have going on here. An important thing to note is whenever you have a return call like this, that will end your function. Now, in P5, you will get an error now with some of the more recent updates whenever it happens, but anything you type afterwards here, um, as you notice now, it's kind of popping up with this here. Um, yeah, unreachable after return. So basically, anything after your return will not get run because as soon as the computer sees the return uh, thing, it will boop. And you can see now we're getting all these random, all the things right here. But basically, as the computer sees this, it will return the value. It will close out of this function. The computer's no longer running it. Return is the command to stop the function, give the value to the other part of the code. So anything after it does not happen. Um, so that's just FYI. That's more of a helpful hint than anything else. Um, it doesn't come up a ton, but it could pop up. I think that's just about it. We've got custom functions. Again, it can be a code that does, again, it's something that does something. It can take arguments versus it doesn't have to, and it can return a value. Uh, it's pretty straightforward, I think. I don't know what's happening with some of this. So we should be seeing several ghosts that are all random here on the screen, but I don't know why we don't see them. Um, that's kind of weird, and we should see other ghosts maybe. Um, well, no, actually, I'm only seeing one ghost call here, um, but yeah. Anyways, I'm not 100% sure why that's the case in that last code. But at this point, I'm kind of rambling, so I'm going to stop for now. If you have any kind of follow up questions or concerns, definitely put those down in the comments below, and I'll respond to them as needed. Again, this is just to kind of show you can make a function with arguments or without, and that they can return value. The point of a function is to kind of take something that you're going to be doing multiple times and reducing it down to a template that you can then customize and call just as needed without having to repeat yourself or copy and paste a bunch of code. So again, now for this case, whenever we want a face, we just call function face, and it will make this face with these customizable aspects. All right, so my next video is going to be on making objects and then classes of objects, as well as the JavaScript object notation, which we've actually already done a little bit of. Not a ton, but a bit. You'll see where it comes back into play, and we'll go from there. And that will wrap out Unit 1 of this course. So after that, there'll be a little pause as I kind of gather my materials and plan out future videos, but I will go through the graphics and sound unit next, and we'll work our way into through the whole course. So that's all from me. Everyone have a great day, and I'll see you all the next time that I see you. Bye.